I was an engineer in the energy sector for 15 years, and afterwards I became an MP. I was elected 7 times, first as an MP for a constituency in Paris, and then for the department of Tarn, the home of a great socialist called Jean Jaurès. I served 5 times as a minister in each of the governments led by François Mitterrand, including the Ministry of Defense, and that's how I became involved in the kind of topics we're discussing here at the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference in Vienna.
Alors c'est très particulier, c'est une anecdote. Je faisais mon service militaire.
It's really an anecdote. I was doing my military service, and since I had attended the École Polytechnique, I was serving as an officer at the Ministry of Defense in Paris, in the section known as the Operational Army Service. One day, the colonel there received a telephone call and was asked to connect to the French president, General Charles de Gaulle, with the Nuclear Arms Operational Center. This was the first time it had happened, and the colonel was too afraid to take the phone. So I spoke to General de Gaulle instead, very briefly. That made a big impression on me. What had an even greater impact on me was when another officer, who was the son of General de Gaulle and doing his military service at the same time as me, asked me how many people would die if an atomic bomb was dropped on, I think it was the city of Kiev. I spent a day calculating the numbers and told him that it would result in around 500,000 deaths. He replied, "Oh, that's not very many. I thought it would be more than that." I remember that very vividly. It made a lasting impression on me.
Alors, cette évolution s'est faite avec l'évolution du monde.
This transition came with the evolution of the world. Before 1989, at the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. Nuclear arms were considered to be a deterrent of East against West and West against East.
L'Ouest contre l'Est. Et on s'était lancé,
and the two blocs launched a crazy arms race so that between 1945, the time of the first nuclear explosions over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and let's say 1994 to 1995, the number of nuclear weapons increased from 0 to almost 75,000.
C'était une folie.
The main players, the United States and the Soviet Union, were willing to reduce their stockpiles, although this was never translated into action, and to introduce control systems such as a system to prohibit nuclear tests. There was also the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but despite all of this, there was a dreadful arms race. At that time, I was the Minister of Defense, and France had deterrence forces. I was the minister, and I had to apply the rules. But at the same time, I was questioning everything. And President François Mitterrand was asking himself the same questions, particularly with regard to tactical or sub-strategic weapons, which were very much the topic of conversation at that time, because they are expensive, dangerous, and of no military use. I remember President Mitterrand asking, "But what are these tactical weapons? How do they work?" We explained that they involve a plane carrying bombs 10 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb, which would be used as a military strike. A warning, so to speak. He said, "A warning? What does that mean?" Well, if a country threatens us, we want to show that we are able to scare it. Yes, but what is the effect? 100,000 people die. 100,000 people die just like that as a warning, and afterwards we razed the country to the ground? I remember how angry he was. Then in 1990, he decided to withdraw one of the components of the nuclear deterrent tripartite system. There was the naval component comprising submarines, the air component which consisted of aircraft, and a land-based component, the Hades and the Pluton missiles. He decided to stop this component. Today, I ask myself whether the aerial component still offers any real value. I don't think so, but not everyone in France agrees.
Tout le monde ne me suit pas en France. C'est tout simple, c'est-à-dire qu'un pays qui n'a pas...
If a country does not have nuclear weapons but is producing fission materials for civil purposes, and it wants to have nuclear weapon capabilities, it needs to conduct tests.
Et si on lui interdit de faire
And if one prohibits these tests, then the country cannot cross the threshold.
Ce qui s'est produit un peu pour la Corée du Nord.
So the CTBT is indeed very important. Unfortunately, it has not entered into force because a certain number of countries, including China and the United States, have not yet ratified the treaty. They have signed it but not ratified it. In the case of the United States, which has upcoming elections, ratification will depend on whether Mr. Obama can convince the Senate accordingly. So when the treaty enters into force, we'll really be able to do something about nuclear proliferation.
Ce n'est pas le seul moyen, mais de lutter contre la prolifération nucléaire. Mais il y a un peu d'hypocrisie.
But there's an element of hypocrisy. None of the big powers, including France, conduct any real large-scale tests anymore.
Fictif, c'est ce qu'on appelle la simulation sur ordinateur.
However, they carry out simulated tests on huge computers.
Sur lesquels on simule des explosions nucléaires. Et pour les pays qui ont déjà
Since those countries which already possess nuclear weapons are no longer able to conduct large-scale tests, simulations are a way of enhancing and modernizing their nuclear stockpiles.
C'est une façon d'améliorer leur puissance, de moderniser. Ce qui, soit dit en passant, va à l'encontre.
And this goes against the letter of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which prescribes that those countries which possess nuclear weapons, there were 5 recognized nuclear weapon states, although there were others which are not recognized, must undertake efforts to disarm and reduce their nuclear stockpiles.
De leur stock nucléaire.
But such a reduction shouldn't be confused with modernization. France, for example, is modernizing its capabilities so that a missile which previously had a range of 4,500 kilometers now has a range of 9,000 kilometers. So the continued modernization of existing nuclear weapons goes against the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which calls for the opposite. I think that the big countries have to lead by example. I'm thinking of China and the United States in particular. But the difficulty is that a certain number of states, which are not signatories of the NPT, continue to play a game that the international community fails to condemn sufficiently, in my opinion. New carriers have been tested, and when India and Pakistan tested new missiles, I didn't hear much criticism. I even know that France is selling an aircraft to India that is capable of carrying a nuclear bomb. That is extremely alarming. Developments in a country like North Korea, which recently conducted an abortive missile test, are equally alarming too. Newspaper reports suggest the reason it failed was because North Korea was unable to procure certain equipment from abroad as a consequence of the international boycott. So this shows that retaliatory measures like boycotts are useful because they prevent states which want to proliferate or want to have nuclear weapons from realizing these intentions.
En faisant un certain nombre de propositions
I have a certain number of propositions which I shall be making in a personal capacity, which I will hand over to the new government. These propositions include a call for a change of attitude on the part of France. I also point out that it's absolutely essential to have a debate on these issues, especially in France. This kind of debate takes different forms in other countries. In France, I think there was too much silence on questions that concern the use of nuclear weapons. The same applies to the position that France takes in disarmament debates, a position that is very backward. I'm thinking of President Sarkozy's reaction to Mr. Obama's speech in Prague when he called for a nuclear weapon-free world. Mr. Sarkozy's only response was to say that this was the virtual world and that the real world was something else. That was a very negative reaction, and France has to change its attitude towards such matters.
Ce livre, c'est le résumé de mes prises de position depuis plusieurs années.
This book is a summary of the positions I've taken over a number of years.
Pas beaucoup de débats en France sur ce sujet.
I have noticed that there is not much debate on the subject of nuclear disarmament in France. But I always hear that there's a consensus across the political spectrum and that the media and the French population all support the notion that nuclear weapons enable France to be in the big league.
Membre permanent du Conseil de sécurité l'ont été en 1945.
But that's nonsense, because the 5 permanent members of the Security Council have been there since 1945, when there were no nuclear bombs. They came much later, for France in 1960. But there is a consensus among politicians, journalists, and the French public that we are a great public because we have nuclear weapons and they will protect us from every kind of danger. That is a stupid attitude, I think. I'm in favor of a real debate, and I've come up with several avenues worth exploring for those who like debating. We need political debates, media debates, a real public debate. That way we can determine the best way to preserve world peace and to establish what the UN calls a culture of peace, something that is, for example, promoted by the network of the Mayors for Peace, of which I am a member. And such a culture of peace is based on popular education and nurtured by discussions among those politicians involved in these issues. Unfortunately, this is not the case in France, which is why I speak of the French lie. I hope that this day will come as soon as possible, but I also realize that we should not be naive. We cannot just decide on the day that 22,000 nuclear warheads are going to disappear. We've managed to reduce the number of nuclear weapons since the end of the Cold War from 65,000 to 22,000, which is good, but we have to get to zero as quickly as possible. That's what the Global Zero movement, to which I belong, believes in, and it also explains the different stages we'll go through before we reach zero. Finally, I don't like the expression one day, because it reminds me of a quote by the economist John Maynard Keynes, who said, "I don't like the long term because in the long term we are all dead." I'd say there were several sources of motivation. First of all, personal and family reasons. I entered politics after a Christian education. I'm now an atheist, but I had a very powerful educational experience during my childhood. Then there was trade unionism, left-wing politics, socialism. For many years, I was an MP in a region that was the home of Jean Jaurès, who died on July the 31st, 1914, on the eve of the First World War. Jean Jaurès was a man of peace. One day he went for a meeting in Germany where he declared that the happiest day of his life would be when France and Germany formed the United States of Europe. 2 world wars followed before this vision came true. And Jean Jaurès was assassinated by an extremist because he wanted peace. I've read a lot about what Jean Jaurès said on the subject, and I know that if you want peace on earth, it's not enough to wave a white flag. You also have to fight for it every day. What happened after the Second World War with the creation of the United Nations is very important. Unfortunately, there have never been as many wars as since 1945, but there was an increasing willingness by the international community, the United Nations, to intervene in order to maintain peace and to prevent wars. This is the case in the Middle East at the moment, but unfortunately it's not that easy because in order to make peace, sometimes you need to make war first. So this is what motivates me. Personal convictions, political convictions, and also the certainty that we can achieve a more peaceful world.
First
of all, the politicians in charge need to be made aware that there's still a lot of work to do. It's not only the work of diplomats or of big international conferences, but more a daily task towards establishing a culture of peace. So this is what motivates me. And that is why I wrote this book, and that's also why I'm in Vienna for the preparatory commission of the NPT.
Je vous l'offre.